Guten Abend, guten Tag. Ich begrüße Sie sehr, sehr herzlich zur 8. mit Cologne. And I ask you to give a warm welcome to our American guest, Stephenie Meyer. To our young actress from Stuttgart. She will read the German passages today. Ich werde ein bisschen Englisch sprechen, ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen und ich werde ein paar wenige Sachen vorab sagen. I will speak a little bit in English, a little bit in German. I will tell them a little bit about you. Stephenie Meyer wurde 1973 in Connecticut geboren. Sie ist in einer großen Familie aufgewachsen, 2 Schwestern, 3 Brüder. She was born in Connecticut in 1973 and she lived in a big family with 2 sisters and 3 brothers. And then she studied English and then she married. Also dann studierte sie Englisch, dann hat sie geheiratet. And now she's a mother of 3 little boys. Und jetzt ist sie Mutter von 3 kleinen Jungen. This is about you. And Stephenie is a bestseller author. She's on the New York bestseller list. She's on the Spiegel bestseller list with her novels. Bis zum Morgengrauen, bis zur Mittagsstunde, bis zum Abendrot. In English it is Twilight, New Moon and Eclipse. And today we hear a part from the new novel, the 3rd novel. And this is something what we call backstory. It is the story of Rosalie, but she will explain it by her own. Also es ist die Stelle über Rosalie, die sie lesen wird. And Katrin Zelmer will read something else that she will explain before. Das wird sie auch erklären, welche Stelle sie liest. Nachher gibt es natürlich die Möglichkeit, Fragen zu stellen. Und jetzt wünsche ich viel Vergnügen. Much fun with Stephenie.
I'm going to read from Rosalie's story. There are 2 reasons why I chose this section. One is that it's a nice, complete story. The other is that it doesn't have very much dialogue. Leave that to the actress and the professional. So this is why Rosalie is who she is. Would you like to hear my story, Bella? It doesn't have a happy ending, but which of ours does? If we had happy endings, we'd all be under gravestones now. I nodded, though I was frightened by the edge in her voice. I lived in a different world than you do, Bella. My human world was a much simpler place. It was 1933, I was 18, and I was beautiful. My life was perfect. She stares out the window at the silver clouds, her expression far away. My parents were thoroughly middle class. My father had a stable job in a bank, something I realize now that he was smug about. He saw his prosperity as a reward for talent and hard work, rather than acknowledging the luck involved. I took it all for granted then. In my home, it was as if the Great Depression was only a troublesome rumor. Of course, I saw the poor people, the ones who weren't as lucky. My father left me with the impression that they brought their troubles on themselves. It was my mother's job to keep our house, and myself and my 2 younger brothers, in spotless order. It was clear that I was both her first priority and her favorite. I didn't fully understand at the time, but I was always vaguely aware that my parents weren't satisfied with what they had, even if it was so much more than most. They wanted more. They had social aspirations, social climbers, I suppose you could call them. My beauty was like a gift to them. They saw so much more potential in it than I did. They weren't satisfied, but I was. I was thrilled to be me, to be Rosalie Hale, pleased that men's eyes watched me everywhere I went from the year I turned 12, delighted that my girlfriends sighed with envy when they touched my hair, happy that my mother was proud of me and that my father liked to buy me pretty dresses. I knew what I wanted out of life, and there didn't seem to be any way that I wouldn't get exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be loved, to be adored. I wanted to have a huge flowery wedding where everyone in town would watch me walk down the aisle on my father's arm and think I was the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. Admiration was like air to me, Bella. I was silly and shallow, but I was content. My parents' influence had been such that I also wanted the material things of life. I wanted a big house with elegant furnishings that someone else would clean, and a modern kitchen that someone else would cook in. As I said, shallow, young and very shallow. and I didn't see any reason why I wouldn't get these things. There were a few things I wanted that were more meaningful, one thing in particular. My very closest friend was a girl named Vera. She married young, just 17. She married a man my parents would never have considered for me, a carpenter. A year later, she had a son, a beautiful little boy with dimples and curly black hair. It was the first time I'd ever felt truly jealous of anyone else in my entire life. She looked at me with unfathomable eyes. It was a different time. I was the same age as you, but I was ready for it all. I yearned for my own little baby. I wanted my own house and a husband who would kiss me when he got home from work, just like Vera. Only I had a very different kind of house in mind. Rosalie sighed, and when she spoke again, her voice was different, the wistfulness gone. In Rochester, there was one royal family, the Kings, ironically enough. Royce King owned the bank my father worked at, and nearly every other really profitable business in town. That's how his son, Royce King II, her mouth twisted around the name and came out through her teeth, saw me the first time. He was going to take over at the bank, so he began overseeing the different positions. 2 days later, my mother conveniently forgot to send my father's lunch to work with him. I remember being confused when she insisted that I wear my white organza and roll my hair up just to run over to the bank. Rosalie laughed without humor. I didn't notice Royce watching me particularly. Everyone watched me. But that night, the first of the roses came. Every night of our courtship, he sent a bouquet of roses to me. My room was always overflowing with them. It got to the point that I would smell like roses when I left the house. Royce was handsome, too. He had lighter hair than I did and pale blue eyes. He said my eyes were like violets, and then those started showing up alongside the roses. My parents approved, that's putting it mildly. This was everything they dreamed of, and Royce seemed to be everything I dreamed of. The fairy tale prince come to make me a princess. Everything I wanted, yet it was still no more than I expected. We were engaged before I'd known him for 2 months. We didn't spend a great deal of time alone with each other. Royce told me he had many responsibilities at work, and when we were together, he liked people to look at us, to see me on his arm. I liked that too. There were lots of parties, dancing, and pretty dresses. When you were a king, every door was open for you, every red carpet rolled out to greet you. It wasn't a long engagement. Plans went ahead for the most lavish wedding. It was going to be everything I'd ever wanted. I was completely happy. When I called it Vera's, I no longer felt jealous. I pictured my fair-haired children playing on the huge lawns of the king's estate, and I pitied her. Rosalie broke off suddenly, clenching her teeth together. It pulled me out of her story, and I realized that the horror was not far off. There would be no happy ending, just as she'd promised. I was at Vera's that night, Rosalie whispered. Her face was smooth as marble and as hard. Her little Henry really was adorable, all smiles and dimples. He was just sitting up on his own. Vera walked me to the door as I was leaving, her baby in her arms and her husband at her side, his arm around her waist. He kissed her on the cheek when he thought I wasn't looking. That bothered me. When Royce kissed me, it wasn't quite the same, not so sweet somehow. I shoved that thought aside. Royce was my prince. Someday I would be queen.